My name is Olivia Carter, and I'm 31 years old. I've spent most of my life feeling like a ghost in my own family, watching from the shadows as my younger sister Sophia basked in the warm glow of our parents' love and approval. Today, as I stand in the humid Cleveland heat outside Lakewood Cemetery, wearing a black dress I bought at Target because I couldn't afford anything better, I realize that even in death, my father Henry Carter has found a way to remind me of my place in this family. The funeral service ended 20 minutes ago, but people are still lingering around the gravesite, their voices a low murmur of condolences and shared memories. I watch as family friends and distant relatives approach Sophia, embracing her with genuine sympathy, telling her how sorry they are for her loss, how much she looks like Dad, how proud he would be of the successful real estate agent she's become. She stands there in her designer black suit, probably worth more than my rent, accepting their comfort with the grace of someone who's always known she was loved. Nobody approaches me. I've been standing here for the better part of an hour, and the only person who's spoken to me is Mrs. Henderson from next door, who patted my shoulder and said, "Your father was a good man, dear." Even she seemed uncomfortable, like she wasn't sure if she should be talking to me at all. The October air carries the smell of dying leaves and freshly turned earth from Dad's grave. Cleveland's autumn has always been my favorite time of year. There's something honest about the way everything prepares to die. No pretense, no false promises of eternal spring. The maple trees surrounding the cemetery are dressed in brilliant reds and golds, their leaves falling like tears onto the green grass below. I pull my thin cardigan tighter around my shoulders and watch as Sophia holds court near the black limousine our family attorney, Mr. Jameson, had arranged. She's 28, 3 years younger than me, but she's always carried herself like she owned the world. Maybe because, in many ways, she did own our world. Our parents' world anyway. Olivia was always the difficult one. I hear Sophia's voice carry on the wind as she speaks to our cousin Rebecca. Even as children, she was jealous, always causing problems. Dad tried so hard with her, but some people just can't appreciate what they have. I feel my cheeks burn with familiar shame and anger. This is nothing new. Sophia has been rewriting our childhood history for years, painting herself as the innocent victim of my supposed jealousy and difficult nature. What she conveniently forgets to mention is how she used to deliberately break my toys and blame me for it, how she'd lie to our parents about things I supposedly did, how she'd wait until they left the room to pinch me hard enough to leave marks, then act confused when I cried. Our parents never questioned her version of events. Why would they? Sophia was their golden child, their perfect little angel who could do no wrong. I was just the mistake they'd made 3 years earlier, the practice run before they figured out how to raise a child properly. I remember the day I realized my parents had a favorite. I was 8 years old, and I'd spent weeks working on a Father's Day card for Dad. I'd drawn a picture of our house with stick figures of our family standing in front, and I'd written, "I love you, Daddy," in my best cursive handwriting. I was so proud of it. I couldn't wait for him to open it. But when Father's Day morning came, Dad opened Sophia's card first, a simple store-bought card with a generic message. His face lit up like she'd given him the crown jewels. He hugged her tight and told her it was the most beautiful card he'd ever received. Then he opened mine, glanced at it for maybe 3 seconds, and said, "That's nice, Olivia. Thank you." He set it aside and didn't look at it again. I found that card in the trash 2 days later. That's when I learned that love isn't automatic, even from your parents. That's when I learned that some children are born lucky, and others spend their whole lives trying to earn what was never meant for them in the first place. Olivia, dear, there you are. Mr. Jameson's voice breaks through my memories. He's a tall, thin man in his 60s with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He's been our family attorney for as long as I can remember, and he's one of the few people who's ever treated me with consistent kindness. I'm so sorry for your loss. Your father was a remarkable man. Thank you, Mr. Jameson. I try to keep my voice steady. He was. I know this is a difficult time, but I wanted to let you and Sophia know that I'll be reading your father's will tomorrow afternoon at my office. 2 o'clock, if that works for you both. I've already spoken to Sophia about it. Of course he has. Of course Sophia knew about this before I did. I'll be there, I say, though I'm not sure why I bother. I have a pretty good idea of what Dad's will contains, and it isn't going to include anything for me. My parents made their feelings about me clear enough while they were alive. I don't expect death to have changed their perspective. Mr. Jameson nods and pats my arm gently. Good. I'll see you tomorrow then. He pauses, studying my face with those kind eyes. "Olivia, I want you to know that your father, well, he loved you very much. Sometimes people have a hard time showing it, but that doesn't mean the love isn't there. I want to believe him. I really do. But 31 years of evidence suggests otherwise. After Mr. Jameson walks away, I stand alone again, watching as the last of the mourners begin to drift toward their cars. The cemetery workers are waiting respectfully at a distance, ready to finish covering Dad's grave once we're gone. I should probably go say goodbye to him one more time, but I'm not sure what I'd say. Thanks for never believing in me. Sorry I wasn't the daughter you wanted. I hope you and Mom are happy together now, wherever you are. Mom died 2 years ago from cancer. During her final months, when she was weak and medicated and maybe feeling sentimental, I thought she might finally tell me she loved me. I thought maybe facing death would strip away all the pretense and disappointment and leave room for something real between us. But even on her deathbed, she spent more time asking about Sophia, worried about whether she was eating enough, whether she was happy in her career, whether she'd find a good man to marry. Her last coherent words to me were instructions about watering her roses. "Olivia," Sophia's voice behind me is sharp and commanding, the way it's always been when she wanted something from me. I turn around to face her, and I'm struck again by how much she looks like Mom. Same blonde hair, same blue eyes, same perfect bone structure. I got Dad's darker coloring and broader build. Not unattractive, but not the delicate beauty that Sophia inherited. She's standing with her arms crossed, her perfect makeup somehow still intact despite the humid weather and emotional day. Behind her, I can see her husband Jake waiting by their BMW, checking his phone with obvious impatience. Jake works in finance and makes good money, though not as much as Sophia does in real estate. They live in a beautiful house in Westlake, one of Cleveland's most expensive suburbs, and they take vacations to places like Napa Valley and the Bahamas. Meanwhile, I rent a 1-bedroom apartment in Lakewood, work as a receptionist at a dental office, and my last vacation was a weekend camping trip to Cuyahoga Valley National Park because it was all I could afford. "I wanted to talk to you before you left," Sophia says, and there's something in her tone that makes me wary. She has the same look she used to get when we were kids, right before she'd do something cruel, and then act like it was an accident. "And what about—" She glances around to make sure we're relatively alone, then steps closer to me. When she speaks, her voice is low but clear, each word carefully chosen for maximum impact. "I wanted to save you the embarrassment tomorrow at the lawyer's office," she says, her blue eyes cold and calculating. "Dad's will is pretty straightforward. He left everything to me. The house, the investments, the life insurance, all of it. I know you might have been hoping for something, but let's be realistic here. You inherit nothing." The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually take a step backward, my mouth opening in shock. Not because I'm surprised by the content. Like I said, I expected this, but because of the way she's chosen to tell me. Here, at Dad's funeral, while his grave is still open behind us, she's decided this is the perfect moment to twist the knife one more time. Sophia, Look, I know this might be disappointing," she continues, talking over me like she always has, "but you have to understand Dad's reasoning. I'm the one who's been successful. I'm the one who made something of myself. I'm the one who gave him reasons to be proud. You never really applied yourself, did you? You never tried to make anything of your life. Why should he reward that?" I can feel tears threatening, but I refuse to give her the satisfaction of seeing me cry. "Not here, not today. He was our father," I whisper, my voice barely audible, "and he made his choice based on who we became as adults." Sophia replies with a shrug. "I'm sorry if that hurts your feelings, but facts are facts. Tomorrow's meeting is really just a formality. I wanted you to know ahead of time so you could adjust your expectations." She turns to walk away, then pauses and looks back at me over her shoulder. "Oh, and Olivia, you might want to start thinking about what you're going to do about Mom and Dad's house. I'll probably be selling it within the next few months. I know you've been using it for storage and treating it like your own personal museum, but that's going to need to stop. It's time to move on." With that, she walks away, her heels clicking against the asphalt as she heads toward her husband and their expensive car. I watch them drive away, leaving me standing alone among the headstones and falling leaves. The cemetery workers are getting restless now, and I know I need to leave soon, but I find myself walking toward Dad's grave one more time, looking down at the polished mahogany casket that's about to be covered with 6 feet of Ohio soil. I tried, "Dad, I whisper to the hole in the ground. I know I was never what you wanted, but I tried. The wind picks up, sending a shower of maple leaves across the cemetery. One lands on Dad's casket, a perfect red leaf, like a final farewell from the trees he loved so much. He used to spend hours in the backyard every fall, raking leaves into perfect piles, only to have Sophia and me jump in them and scatter them everywhere again. He'd pretend to be annoyed, but I could see him hiding a smile. That's one of my few good memories of him. Maybe the only one where I felt like he actually enjoyed having me around. I take a deep breath and turn away from the grave. The cemetery workers nod respectfully as I pass them, and I make my way to my beat-up Honda Civic, parked at the far end of the lot, because I was embarrassed to park it near the other mourners. Nicer cars. As I drive home through the familiar streets of Cleveland, I think about what Sophia said. Tomorrow's meeting is just a formality. I inherit nothing. The words echo in my head like a cruel song I can't stop humming. But there's something nagging at me, something that doesn't quite fit. If the will is so straightforward, if it's really just a formality, then why did Mr. Jameson seem, I don't know, almost nervous when he mentioned it? Why did he make that comment about Dad loving me, like he was trying to prepare me for something? Maybe I'm reading too much into it. Maybe I'm just desperate to believe that somewhere in my father's heart, there was room for me after all. Maybe I'm setting myself up for even more disappointment tomorrow. But as I pull into the parking lot of my apartment complex, passing the broken streetlight that's been flickering for 6 months, I make a decision. I'm going to that meeting tomorrow, not because I expect to inherit anything meaningful, but because I need to hear it officially. I need closure. I need to finally, once and for all, accept that I was never meant to be part of this family's legacy. What I don't know yet is that tomorrow will change everything I thought I knew about my father, my family, and myself. What I don't know is that Sophia's cruel confidence is about to crumble, and that the secret Dad kept hidden for 31 years is about to turn our world completely upside down. But tonight, all I know is that I'm tired. Tired of being invisible. Tired of being disappointed. Tired of hoping for love that was never meant for me. Tomorrow, I'll learn that sometimes the people we think we know best are the ones keeping the biggest secrets of all. I barely slept last night. Every time I closed my eyes, I could hear Sophia's voice echoing in my head. You inherit nothing. The words felt like they'd been carved into my brain with a knife, sharp and permanent and impossible to ignore. I spent most of the night staring at the water stain on my bedroom ceiling, thinking about all the ways my family had made it clear over the years that I didn't belong. The birthday parties where Sophia got elaborate celebrations while I got store-bought cake and a card. The Christmas mornings where her pile of presents towered over mine. The family photos where I always seemed to be standing slightly apart from everyone else, like even the camera knew I didn't fit. By the time my alarm went off at 7, I'd already been awake for 3 hours. I called in sick to work, something I never do because Dr. Peterson's dental office barely pays me enough to cover my bills as it is, and I can't afford to lose any pay. But I couldn't imagine sitting at that reception desk all day, answering phones and scheduling appointments while my mind was spinning with thoughts about this afternoon's meeting. Instead, I spent the morning cleaning my apartment with the kind of desperate energy that comes from having nowhere else to put your anxiety. I scrubbed the bathroom until the tiles gleamed, organized my closet by color and season, and even wiped down the baseboards, something I hadn't done since I moved in 2 years ago. It didn't help. Nothing could quiet the voice in my head that kept whispering all the cruel things Sophia had said, all the ways she was probably right about me. At 11:30, I finally forced myself to eat something, a piece of toast that tasted like cardboard, and started getting ready for the meeting. I don't own many professional clothes, but I have one navy blue dress that I bought for job interviews a few years ago. It's nothing fancy, but it's clean and appropriate, and it makes me feel slightly more confident than I actually am. As I applied my makeup in the bathroom mirror, I found myself studying my reflection critically. Sophia was right about one thing. I never made anything of myself. At 31, I'm still working the same dead-end receptionist job I took right after college. I never traveled anywhere exotic, never bought a house, never got married, never had kids. My life is small and quiet and unremarkable in every possible way. But looking at myself in that mirror, I realized something else. I'm tired of apologizing for who I am. I'm tired of feeling ashamed for not being Sophia. Maybe I didn't become a successful real estate agent, or marry someone rich or live in a mansion in Westlake. Maybe my life looks ordinary from the outside. But I've survived 31 years in a family that never wanted me, and that has to count for something. The law office of Jameson and Associates is located in a converted Victorian house in Cleveland Heights, about 20 minutes from my apartment. I'd been there once before, when Mom died and we had to deal with her will. That day, Sophia had inherited Mom's jewelry and china, while I got a box of old photo albums and some books. Even in death, Mom had made it clear who mattered more. I arrived 15 minutes early and sat in my car outside the office, watching other people come and go. A young couple walked up the front steps, holding hands and looking nervous, probably there to draft their first will or buy their first house. An older man in an expensive suit strode through the front door like he owned the place. Everyone seemed to belong there except me. At exactly 2 o'clock, I walked through the front door and into the reception area. The secretary, a woman about my age with kind eyes and a warm smile, looked up from her computer. "You must be Olivia Carter," she said. "Mr. Jameson is expecting you. You can go right back. It's the second door on the left." I followed her directions down a hallway lined with law books and old photographs of Cleveland, my heart hammering against my ribs. When I knocked on Mr. Jameson's door, his familiar voice called out, "Come in, Mr." Jameson's office was exactly as I remembered it, warm and comfortable, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a large oak desk, and 2 leather chairs facing each other. He stood up when I entered, extending his hand with a gentle smile. "Olivia, thank you for coming. Please, have a seat." I settled into one of the leather chairs, trying to project a calm I didn't feel. "Is Sophia not here yet?" Mr. Jameson sat back down behind his desk and folded his hands carefully. "And actually, Olivia, I asked you to come alone today. Sophia will be here tomorrow for her portion of the will reading." I blinked in surprise. "Her portion?" "Yes." He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a manila envelope, thick with documents. "Your father's will is complex. There are certain provisions that he wanted handled separately, and those provisions concern you specifically." My mouth went dry. "I don't understand, Mr." Jameson leaned forward, his expression serious but not unkind. "Olivia, how much did your father tell you about his business dealings over the years?" "Not much," I admitted. I knew he worked in manufacturing, something with automotive parts, but he never talked about work at home, at least not around me. That's what I thought. Mr. Jameson opened the envelope and pulled out several documents. "Your father was a very successful businessman, much more successful than most people realized. Carter Manufacturing wasn't just a small parts supplier. It was a major contractor for several automotive companies, including Ford and General Motors. When your father sold the business 5 years ago, he made considerably more money than anyone in your family knew about." I stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. "How much more?" "The sale of Carter Manufacturing, combined with your father's investments and life insurance policies, means his estate is worth approximately $4.3 million. The number hit me like a physical blow. I actually gasped out loud. $4 million. My father was a millionaire, and I had no idea. But that's not the most important part, Olivia. Mr. Jameson's voice was gentle but firm. The important part is what your father decided to do with that money. He slid a document across the desk to me. It was several pages long, covered in legal language that was hard to decipher, but I could make out my name repeated throughout the text. "I don't understand," I whispered, scanning the pages with growing confusion. "Let me explain it in simple terms," Mr. Jameson said. "According to your father's will, Sophia inherits the family home and its contents, as well as $50,000 in cash. The rest of the estate, approximately $4.2 million, goes to you." The world tilted sideways. I gripped the arms of my chair, certain I was about to faint. "That's impossible," I managed to say. "There has to be some mistake." Sophia said. "Sophia knows nothing about this," Mr. Jameson interrupted. "Your father was very specific about that. He instructed me to tell her only about the house and the $50,000. She has no idea about the manufacturing business sale or the true size of the estate." I stared down at the legal documents, the words swimming in front of my eyes. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to people like me. But why? The question came out as a croak. Why would he do this? He never... we weren't close. He never even acted like he loved me. Mr. Jameson's expression grew sad, and he pulled out another document from the envelope. This one handwritten in my father's familiar scrawl. "He left you a letter," he said quietly. "Perhaps this will help explain." With trembling hands, I took the letter and unfolded it. My father's handwriting was as neat and precise as I remembered, the same careful script he used to write grocery lists and birthday cards. My dear Olivia, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and James is finally able to give you what I should have given you while I was alive, the truth. I know I was not a good father to you. I know I failed you in ways that probably hurt you more than you ever let on. I know that you grew up feeling unloved and unwanted, and I know that's my fault. The truth is, I was afraid of you. That probably sounds crazy, but it's true. From the time you were small, you reminded me so much of myself, not just in the way you looked, but in your stubbornness, your independence, your refusal to just go along with things because that's what was expected. You asked hard questions. You challenged things that Sophia just accepted. You made me uncomfortable because you made me think. Your mother and I, we knew how to handle Sophia. She was easy to understand, easy to please. She wanted the things we understood: popularity, success, material comfort. We could give her those things, and in return, she gave us the kind of daughter we thought we wanted. But you were different. You were always different. You read books that were too old for you. You asked why the world worked the way it did. You cared about things that seemed too big and complicated for a child to worry about. I didn't know how to connect with that part of you, and instead of trying harder, I just gave up. I took the easy path and focused on Sophia instead. I convinced myself that you didn't need as much attention, that you were strong enough to take care of yourself. But the truth is, I was just a coward. I was scared that if I really tried to know you, I might discover that you were smarter than me, stronger than me, better than me in all the ways that actually matter. So I kept you at a distance, and I let your mother do the same thing. We told ourselves we were being fair, but we weren't. We were just protecting our own egos. I want you to know that I was proud of you, even when I never said it. I was proud when you graduated college despite getting no help from us. I was proud when you got your first job and your first apartment. I was proud when you stayed kind and gentle despite having every reason to become bitter and hard. Most of all, I was proud that you became the person you are, without any help from me. That took a strength I never had. I'm giving you this money, not because I think it will make up for 31 years of failing you as a father. Nothing could do that. I'm giving it to you because you deserve to have choices in your life. You deserve to be able to pursue dreams instead of just surviving. You deserve to have the freedom to become whoever you want to be. I also need you to know something about Sophia that you probably already suspect, but have been too kind to say out loud. Your sister has never learned to value anything she had to work for, because everything was always given to her. The house and the $50,000 I'm leaving her will be gone within 2 years, spent on vacations and clothes and whatever else catches her fancy. But you understand the value of things because you've had to work for everything you have. I trust you to use this inheritance wisely, not just for yourself, but to build something meaningful. I know this letter can't undo the damage I did by withholding my love from you for so long, but I want you to know that I did love you, Olivia. I loved you so much that it scared me. I loved you enough to spend the last 5 years of my life making sure you would be taken care of after I was gone. I'm sorry it took me so long to find a way to show you. Your father, Henry Carter, P.S. There's one more thing. Check the safe deposit box at First National Bank. Box 247. James has the key. Your real inheritance isn't just the money. By the time I finished reading, tears were streaming down my cheeks. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the letter. All those years of feeling unloved, of believing I was a disappointment, of thinking there was something fundamentally wrong with me that made me unworthy of my parents' affection. And the truth was so much more complicated than I'd ever imagined. Mr. Jameson handed me a tissue and waited patiently while I tried to compose myself. The safe deposit box, I finally managed to say. What's in it? I don't know, he admitted. Your father never told me, but I have the key right here. He pulled a small silver key from the envelope and placed it on the desk between us. I stared at it, this tiny piece of metal that apparently held one more secret my father had kept from all of us. There's something else you should know, Mr. Jameson continued gently. Your father made arrangements for the inheritance to be transferred to you immediately. The money is already in an account with your name on it. You could walk out of here today and never have to worry about money again. $4 million. The number still didn't feel real. Yesterday, I was a receptionist living paycheck to paycheck. And today I was, what? Rich. Wealthy. I didn't even know what words to use. "What do I do now?" I asked, feeling completely overwhelmed. "That's up to you," Mr. Jameson said with a small smile. "But if I may offer some advice, don't make any major decisions for at least a few weeks. Let this settle in first. And remember what your father said. This money is meant to give you choices, not to define you." I nodded, still trying to process everything. "When will Sophia find out?" "Tomorrow, when she comes in for her portion of the will reading. She'll learn about the house and the $50,000, but nothing about the rest of the estate. Your father was very clear that the larger inheritance was to remain private unless you chose to share it." The thought of Sophia's reaction made my stomach twist with anxiety. How would she handle learning that everything she thought she knew about our father's will was wrong? How would she react to discovering that the daughter she'd spent her whole life dismissing as worthless had inherited everything she thought was rightfully hers? "She's going to hate me even more than she already does," I said quietly. "Perhaps," Mr. Jameson acknowledged. "But that's not your responsibility, Olivia. Your father made his choice based on his own judgment and his own reasons. You don't owe anyone an apology for inheriting what he chose to leave you." I folded my father's letter carefully and put it in my purse, along with the key to the safe deposit box. The legal documents felt heavy in my hands, not because of their weight, but because of everything they represented. "Can I ask you something, Mr. Jameson?" "Of course. Did you know my father well? I mean, really know him?" Mr. Jameson was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "I knew him as a client for over 15 years, and I'd say we developed a friendship of sorts during that time. He was a complicated man, Olivia. He had regrets, deep ones, but he was also proud. Maybe too proud to admit his mistakes while he was still alive to fix them. Do you think he really loved me?" "I think," Mr. Jameson said gently, "that he loved you so much it terrified him. And I think he spent the last years of his life trying to find a way to show you that love in the only way he knew how." When I left the law office an hour later, my head was spinning and my heart was racing. I sat in my car for a long time, just breathing, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. $4 million. A father who loved me but didn't know how to show it. A sister who was about to discover that everything she believed about our family was a lie. I thought about driving to the bank to check the safe deposit box, but I wasn't ready for any more revelations today. Instead, I drove home to my small apartment, where I sat on my second-hand couch and stared at the walls, wondering what the hell I was supposed to do with my life now. The one thing I knew for certain was that tomorrow, when Sophia learned about her modest inheritance, she was going to assume she'd gotten everything just like she'd expected. She would have no idea that her cruel words at the funeral, "You inherit nothing," were about to become the most ironic statement she'd ever made. For the first time since the funeral, I found myself smiling. It wasn't a mean smile. Not exactly. It was more like the smile of someone who had spent 31 years expecting the worst, and had finally, impossibly, been given the best instead. Tomorrow was going to be very interesting. I woke up the next morning feeling like I'd been living in someone else's life for the past 24 hours. For a few confused seconds, lying there in my narrow bed with sunlight streaming through my cheap curtains, I wondered if I'd dreamed the whole thing. The will reading, the money, my father's letter. Maybe it had all been some kind of elaborate fantasy my grief-stricken mind had conjured up to cope with Sophia's cruelty at the funeral. But then I saw my purse sitting on my dresser, and I remembered the letter folded carefully inside it, along with that small silver key. It was real. All of it was real. I had trouble focusing at work again. Dr. Peterson noticed me staring off into space during the morning appointment rush and asked if I was feeling all right. I told him I was still processing my father's death, which was true enough, just not in the way he probably imagined. Around lunchtime, I couldn't stand the suspense anymore. I told Dr. Peterson I needed to run an errand and drove to First National Bank downtown. My hands were trembling as I presented the key to the bank manager, a middle-aged woman with graying hair and a no-nonsense demeanor. "Box 247, she said, checking her records. "You're Olivia Carter." "Yes, ma'am." She led me to a small private room and brought the safe deposit box, then left me alone with whatever secrets my father had hidden away. The box was heavier than I'd expected, and when I opened it, I understood why. Inside were several manila envelopes, each labeled in my father's careful handwriting. The first was marked, "For Olivia, property deeds." The second said, "For Olivia, stock certificates." The third, thickest envelope was labeled, "For Olivia, the truth about our family." My heart hammered as I opened the property deeds envelope first. Inside were documents for 3 different properties: a lake house in Vermilion, Ohio that I'd never heard of, a small commercial building in downtown Cleveland that was apparently generating rental income, and most shocking of all, a deed for a house in Shaker Heights, one of Cleveland's most exclusive neighborhoods. The stock certificates envelope contained documentation for investments in Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, and several other companies. Even with my limited financial knowledge, I could see that these stocks were worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. But it was the third envelope that made my hands shake as I opened it. Inside were dozens of photographs, documents, and what appeared to be a private investigator's report. The photographs showed a woman I didn't recognize, someone in her 50s with dark hair and kind eyes, standing outside various locations around Cleveland. Some of the photos included a man who looked vaguely familiar, though I couldn't place where I might have seen him. At the top of the pile was another letter in my father's handwriting, this one longer than the first. Olivia, if you're reading this, then you've already learned about the money, and you've probably started to understand that our family's story is more complicated than you were ever told. The woman in these photographs is named Elena Martinez. She's 53 years old, and she works as a nurse at Cleveland Clinic. She's also your half-sister. I dropped the letter like it had burned me. My half-sister? That was impossible. My parents had been married for 35 years. They'd never mentioned any other children, never hinted that there were secrets in their past. With shaking hands, I picked up the letter again and kept reading. I met Elena's mother, Carmen Martinez, when I was 22 years old, 2 years before I met your mother. Carmen was 19, working as a waitress downtown while going to nursing school at night. We fell in love, and we planned to get married, but my parents didn't approve. Carmen was Mexican-American, from a working-class family, and my parents thought she wasn't good enough for their son who was going to inherit the family business. They threatened to disown me if I married her. I was young and stupid and scared, and I let them pressure me into breaking things off with Carmen. What I didn't know was that she was pregnant. Carmen never told me about the baby. She was proud, and she probably figured I'd already made my choice when I broke up with her. She raised Elena alone, working 2 jobs to put herself through nursing school and support her daughter. I didn't find out about Elena until 15 years ago, when Carmen was dying of cancer, and she finally reached out to me. She didn't want anything from me. No money, no relationship, nothing. She just thought I should know that I had another daughter before she died. By then, Elena was 38 years old with a life of her own. She was married to a good man named David Martinez, and they had 2 children together. Your nephew Miguel, who's now 24 and just finished medical school, and your niece Sophia, who's 21 and studying to be a teacher. I met with Elena a few times after Carmen died. She was angry at first, which she had every right to be, but eventually, we developed a cautious relationship. I helped pay for Miguel's medical school, though Elena insisted on treating it as a loan, and has been paying me back every month for the past 4 years. Elena is everything you are: Olivia, strong, independent, kind, despite having every reason to be bitter. She never asked me for anything, never tried to insert herself into our family's life, never caused any trouble. She just lived quietly, raised her children well, and took care of her patients at the hospital. I should have told you and Sophia about her years ago. I should have brought our families together, should have given you the chance to know your sister and your nephew and niece. But I was a coward, just like I was a coward about so many other things. I'm telling you now because I want you to have the choice I never gave you. Elena doesn't know about this inheritance. She has no idea that I've left you anything, or that I've kept track of her family all these years. The private investigator's reports in this envelope will give you her current address and information about her children. What you do with this information is entirely up to you. But if you decide to reach out to her, I think you'll find that you have more family than you ever knew about, and that it's the kind of family you've always deserved to have. Your father, Henry. I sat in that small, windowless room for what felt like hours, staring at photographs of a woman who shared my father's dark eyes and my own stubborn chin. Elena Martinez, my half-sister, a nurse, a mother, a woman who'd been living 20 minutes away from me for decades without either of us knowing the other existed. The private investigator's report was thorough and somewhat invasive, but it painted a picture of a life well lived. Elena had been married to David Martinez for 26 years. He was a high school math teacher, and they lived in a modest house in Parma. Their son Miguel had just started his residency at the Cleveland Clinic, specializing in pediatrics. Their daughter Sophia was in her senior year at Ohio State, studying elementary education. There were photos of family gatherings, birthday parties, graduations. In every single picture, Elena was smiling, not the calculated, perfect smile that Sophia had mastered, but a genuine, warm expression that reached her eyes. She looked like someone who laughed easily, someone who genuinely enjoyed her life, despite all the hardships she'd faced. She looked like someone I wanted to know. By the time I left the bank, it was almost 4 o'clock. Sophia would be having her meeting with Mr. Jameson right about now, learning about her modest inheritance and probably feeling quite pleased with herself. I wondered how long it would take her to realize that something didn't add up. $50,000 and a house was a nice inheritance, but it wasn't the kind of money that justified my father's successful business reputation. I drove home slowly, my mind spinning with everything I'd learned. In the span of 2 days, I'd gone from having no family who cared about me to potentially having a half-sister, a brother-in-law, a nephew, and a niece I'd never met. The loneliness that had been my constant companion for 31 years suddenly felt less permanent, less inevitable, but I was also terrified. What if I reached out to Elena and she wanted nothing to do with me? What if she blamed me for my father's absence from her life? What if she saw me as just another reminder of all the ways he'd failed her and her mother? I was so lost in thought that I almost didn't notice the familiar BMW parked outside my apartment building. Almost. Sophia was sitting in her car, talking animatedly on her phone. Even from a distance, I could see that she was upset. Her free hand was gesturing wildly, and her usually perfect composure had cracked. When she saw my Honda pull into the parking lot, she ended her call abruptly and got out of her car. She was still wearing her business suit from the lawyer's office, but her hair was slightly mussed and her lipstick had worn off. For the first time in my memory, Sophia looked rattled. "Olivia, we need to talk," she said as soon as I got out of my car. Her voice was sharp with barely controlled panic. "About what?" "About Dad's will. Something's wrong. Something doesn't make sense." I kept my expression neutral, though my heart was racing. "What do you mean?" Sophia followed me up the stairs to my apartment, talking rapidly. "The numbers don't add up, Olivia. Jameson says Dad left me the house and $50,000 on, but that can't be everything. Dad's business was worth millions when he sold it 5 years ago. I know because I asked him about it when Mom got sick and we needed money for her treatments. I unlocked my apartment door and let her in, trying to buy time to think. Sophia immediately started pacing around my small living room like a caged animal. "So, where's the rest of the money?" she continued. "Jameson claims he doesn't know what I'm talking about, but that's impossible. Dad had to have millions in assets somewhere. Did he leave it to charity? Did he hide it somehow? Did someone steal it?" I sat down on my couch and watched her pace. For someone who'd spent her entire life getting everything she wanted, Sophia was remarkably bad at handling disappointment. "Maybe the business wasn't worth as much as you thought," I suggested carefully. "No, that's not possible." Sophia stopped pacing and turned to face me. "I did research, Olivia. I looked up Carter Manufacturing's contracts with Ford and GM. Dad was making millions of dollars a year before he sold the company. That money has to be somewhere." She stared at me intently, and I could see the moment when suspicion began to creep into her expression. "Unless," she said slowly, "unless someone else inherited it." My mouth went dry, but I forced myself to remain calm. "What are you talking about? Did Dad leave you anything, Olivia? Anything at all?" This was the moment. I could lie, could protect myself from Sophia's inevitable rage by keeping my father's secret a little longer, or I could tell her the truth and face whatever came next. I thought about my father's letter, about how he'd called me strong and independent and kind. I thought about Elena Martinez, raising her children alone while my father lived in luxury with his real family. I thought about 31 years of being treated like I didn't matter, like I was some kind of burden my parents had to tolerate. I was done hiding. I was done being ashamed of who I was. "Yes," I said quietly. "Dad left me something." Sophia's eyes lit up with relief. "I knew it. What did he leave you? Money? Investments? Where is it? We can combine our inheritances and he left me everything else." "Sophia." The words hung in the air between us like a bomb waiting to explode. Sophia stared at me, her mouth slightly open, clearly not understanding what I'd just said. "What do you mean? Everything else?" "I mean, he left me the rest of his estate. About $4.2 million, plus some properties and investments." Sophia's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, and finally, pure rage. Her cheeks flushed red, and her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "That's impossible," she said, her voice rising. "You're lying." "I'm not lying." "Yes, you are. Dad would never leave you that kind of money. You're nobody, Olivia. You work at a dental office. You live in this shitty apartment. You drive a 10-year-old Honda. Why would he leave millions of dollars to someone who's never accomplished anything in their life?" Each word was designed to wound, but for the first time in my life, they bounced off me like raindrops. I had my father's letter in my purse, proof that he'd seen value in me that Sophia never could. I had a bank account with more money than I'd ever dreamed of having. Most importantly, I had the knowledge that somewhere in Cleveland, there was a family who might actually want to know me. "Maybe," I said calmly. He left it to me because he knew I'd use it wisely instead of spending it all on vacations and designer clothes. Sophia's face went white with fury. "You ungrateful bitch. After everything our family did for you, after we put a roof over your head and food on your table, this is how you repay us. By stealing what should have been mine." "I didn't steal anything, Sophia. Dad made his own choices." "Bullshit." She was screaming now, completely out of control. "You manipulated him somehow. You probably filled his head with lies about me, made him think I didn't deserve his money. You always were jealous of me, always trying to bring me down to your level." I stood up from the couch, and something in my posture must have warned her to back off because she took a step backward. "Get out of my apartment," I said quietly. "This isn't over, Olivia. I'm going to contest the will. I'm going to prove that you coerced Dad into changing it. I'm going to get out." Sophia stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her struggling with the realization that for the first time in our lives, I wasn't backing down. I wasn't apologizing. I wasn't trying to make peace or smooth things over, or pretend that everything was fine. "You won't get away with this," she said finally. "That money should be mine, and everyone's going to know what you really are." She stormed out, slamming my apartment door so hard that my neighbor's dog started barking. I sat back down on my couch and listened to her car peel out of the parking lot, leaving behind the smell of burned rubber and 31 years of accumulated resentment. For a few minutes, I just sat there in the sudden silence, processing what had just happened. Sophia knew the truth now, and she was never going to forgive me for it. Our already damaged relationship was probably beyond repair, but strangely, I felt lighter than I had in years. The secret was out. The pretense was over. I didn't have to spend any more energy trying to win love from someone who was never going to give it to me. I pulled my father's letter out of my purse and read it again, focusing on the parts about Elena and her children. Maybe it was time to find out if I really did have family somewhere. The kind of family that would value me for who I was, instead of resenting me for who I wasn't. Tomorrow, I decided, I was going to be brave. Tomorrow, I was going to take the biggest risk of my life and reach out to a woman who might be the sister I'd always dreamed of having. Tonight, though, I was going to order pizza, drink a glass of wine, and celebrate the fact that for the first time in my adult life, I had choices. Real choices. The kind of choices that money could buy. But more importantly, the kind of choices that came from finally knowing I was worth something. Sophia could contest the will all she wanted. She could hire lawyers and private investigators and try to prove that I'd somehow manipulated our dying father into loving me. But she couldn't change the truth that was written in his own hand, couldn't erase the evidence of his regret and his hope that I might finally get the life I deserved. As I dialed the number for Tony's Pizza, I found myself smiling. Tomorrow was going to bring new challenges, new uncertainties, new reasons to be scared. But for the first time in my life, I was looking forward to being scared, because being scared meant I was finally, truly alive. I spent the next 3 days researching Elena Martinez online, trying to work up the courage to contact her. It felt strange, almost like stalking, to learn about someone's life through social media and public records. But I needed to understand who she was before I disrupted her world with the news that she had a half-sister she'd never known about. What I found made me both hopeful and nervous. Elena's Facebook page was full of pictures of her family, her husband David cooking in their kitchen, her son Miguel in his white coat at the hospital, her daughter Sophia at various college events. She posted inspirational quotes about nursing, shared articles about healthcare, and celebrated her children's achievements with the obvious pride of a devoted mother. She looked happy, genuinely, completely happy in a way that I wasn't sure I'd ever been. And I was terrified that my sudden appearance in her life might somehow damage that happiness. but I also couldn't stop thinking about my father's words. I think you'll find that you have more family than you ever knew about, and that it's the kind of family you've always deserved to have. On Thursday morning, I finally worked up the courage to drive to Cleveland Clinic during Elena's lunch break. According to the private investigator's report, she usually ate in the hospital cafeteria between noon and 1 o'clock on weekdays. I had no plan beyond showing up and hoping I'd recognize her from the photographs. The Cleveland Clinic campus was enormous and intimidating, full of people in scrubs and white coats hurrying between buildings with the kind of purposeful energy that comes from saving lives. I felt completely out of place in my receptionist clothes, clutching a manila envelope that contained copies of our father's letters and some of the photographs from the safe deposit box. The cafeteria was crowded and noisy, filled with medical staff grabbing quick meals between shifts. I bought a cup of coffee I didn't want and found a table where I could watch the entrance, my heart hammering with nervousness. At 12:15, I saw her. Elena Martinez was smaller than I'd expected from the photographs, maybe 5'4" with graying dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She was wearing navy blue scrubs and comfortable shoes, and she moved through the cafeteria line with the efficient grace of someone who'd done this routine thousands of times. When she smiled at the cashier, her whole face lit up in exactly the same way mine did, something I'd never noticed I inherited from our father. She chose a table near the windows, alone with a salad and a book. I watched her for several minutes, trying to work up the courage to approach her. She read while she ate, occasionally smiling at something in her book, completely unaware that her life was about to change forever. Finally, I forced myself to stand up and walk over to her table. My legs felt like jelly, and I was sure I was going to embarrass myself by fainting or throwing up or saying something completely stupid. "Excuse me," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Are you Elena Martinez?" She looked up from her book with the polite but slightly wary expression people get when strangers approach them in public places. "Yes, I am. Can I help you?" Up close, the family resemblance was even more obvious. We had the same dark eyes, the same stubborn jawline, the same way of tilting our heads slightly when we were thinking. Looking at her was like looking into a mirror that showed me what I might have been if I'd grown up in a loving family. "My name is Olivia Carter," I said, and I watched her face carefully for any sign of recognition. I think we might be related." Elena's expression shifted from polite confusion to something sharper. She set her book down and studied my face intently. "Carter," she repeated slowly. "As in Henry Carter? He was my father." The silence stretched between us for what felt like an eternity. Elena's face went through a series of emotions: surprise, wariness, something that might have been pain, and finally, a careful neutrality that told me she was protecting herself from whatever I was about to say. "I see," she said finally. And what brings you to me, Olivia?" I sat down across from her without being invited, pulling the manila envelope out of my purse. "My father died 5 days ago. Yesterday, I found out that you exist." Elena's carefully controlled expression cracked slightly. "I'm sorry for your loss," she said quietly, and I could tell she meant it, despite whatever complicated feelings she might have about my father. "Thank you." I pushed the envelope across the table to her. "He left me some things: letters, photographs, information about you and your family. I think he wanted me to find you." Elena stared at the envelope like it might bite her. "What kind of information?" "He knew about Miguel's medical school, about Sophia's education major. He knew where you work, where you live. He's been keeping track of your family for years." "Keeping track," Elena repeated, and there was a bitter edge to her voice now. But not keeping in touch." "No, not keeping in touch." Elena picked up the envelope and opened it slowly, pulling out my father's letter and some of the photographs. She read silently, her face revealing nothing, while I sat across from her feeling like my entire future hung in the balance. Finally, she looked up at me. "You didn't know about me at all." "Nothing. I had no idea my father had another family before he married my mother." "Another family?" Elena said with a slight, sad smile. "Is that what he called us in his letter?" I thought about the exact wording. "He called you his daughter. He called Miguel and Sophia his grandchildren. He said he should have brought our families together years ago." Elena was quiet for a long moment, staring out the cafeteria windows at the busy Cleveland street beyond. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. "Your father came to see me when my mother was dying 15 years ago, she said. "It was the first time I'd seen him since I was 5 years old. When my mother finally stopped hoping he'd come back and married my stepfather instead. What was that like? Seeing him again after so long. Confusing, Elena admitted. I was angry at first. Furious, actually. Here was this man who'd abandoned my mother when she needed him most, showing up decades later because he felt guilty. But he wasn't what I expected. What did you expect? Someone arrogant, I suppose. Someone who'd justify his choices or try to explain them away. But he just apologized. He said he'd been young and stupid and scared, and that my mother and I deserved better than what he'd given us. Elena pulled out one of the photographs, a picture of Miguel's medical school graduation that my father had somehow obtained. He asked if he could help with Miguel's education. I said no at first, but he was persistent. He said it wasn't charity, that it was the least he could do for his grandson. So you let him help. Eventually, Miguel's medical school loans would have buried our family financially. When Henry offered to pay for his education, I finally accepted, but only as a loan. I've been paying him back every month for 4 years. I thought about the bank account that now had my name on it, about the millions of dollars my father had left me. Elena had been paying him back money he didn't need while I'd been living paycheck to paycheck, never knowing that help was available. Elena, I said carefully, there's something else you should know. About my father's will. She raised an eyebrow. Oh, he left me almost everything. Over $4 million. Elena's eyes widened. $4 million. He sold his business 5 years ago for much more than anyone in my family realized, and he left it all to me, along with a letter explaining why. I paused, then added quietly, he also left instructions for me to find you. He wanted me to know that I had a sister. Elena was quiet for so long that I started to worry I'd said something wrong. Finally, she spoke. A sister, she said, testing the word. I always wondered what it would be like to have a sister. You did? Growing up, it was just me and my mother, and then me and my mother and my stepfather after she remarried. I used to imagine having siblings, having a big family with lots of cousins and aunts and uncles. I especially used to wish for a sister. Tears pricked my eyes. I used to wish for that too. I have a sister, but we're not close. The daughter Henry raised? Sophia. She's 3 years younger than me, and she's always been my parents' favorite. We found out about the inheritance a few days ago, and she didn't take it well. Elena studied my face with the sharp intelligence I could see she'd passed on to both her children. She thought she was going to inherit everything. She told me at my father's funeral that I would inherit nothing. She was very confident about it. And now she's talking about contesting the will. She thinks I manipulated him somehow, convinced him to change it. Elena snorted, a sound that was half laughter and half disdain. Anyone who thinks you could manipulate Henry Carter into doing something he didn't want to do never really knew him. That man was stubborn as a mule when he made up his mind about something. You think he really meant for me to have it? The inheritance? Olivia, Elena said gently, I think your father spent the last 15 years of his life trying to figure out how to make up for the mistakes he made with all of us. He couldn't undo the past, but he could try to give his daughters a better future. Daughters. Plural. Yes, plural. Elena smiled, and it transformed her entire face. So, sister, what are you going to do with $4 million? The word, sister, sent a warm rush through my chest. Nobody had ever called me sister with affection before. I don't know, I admitted. I never expected to have money. I barely know how to balance my checking account, let alone manage millions of dollars. Well, Elena said, gathering up her things as other medical staff began filling the cafeteria for the afternoon shift change. The first thing you should do is hire a good financial advisor. The second thing you should do is come to my house for dinner this weekend so you can meet your brother-in-law and your nephew and niece. My heart leaped. Really? You want me to meet them? Olivia, I've spent 53 years wondering about the family I never had. I'm not about to waste any more time now that you've found me. She stood up and shouldered her purse, then paused and looked down at me with an expression I'd never seen directed at me before. Warmth, acceptance, genuine affection. Besides, she added with a grin that was pure mischief, Miguel and Sophia are going to be so excited to learn they have a rich aunt. I laughed out loud, probably the first genuine laugh I'd had since before my father's funeral. I'm still getting used to the idea of being rich, and I'm still getting used to the idea of having a sister. I guess we'll figure it out together. Elena gave me her phone number and address, and we made plans for me to come to dinner on Saturday night. As I watched her walk away, heading back to her shift taking care of sick children, I felt something I'd never experienced before, the warm, solid certainty of belonging to someone. I drove home with tears streaming down my face, but for the first time in my adult life, they were happy tears. Saturday evening couldn't come fast enough. I spent the week researching financial advisors and meeting with investment counselors, trying to understand my new reality. I also spent a lot of time shopping for gifts for Elena's family, eventually settling on a beautiful silk scarf for Elena, a leather briefcase for David, a stethoscope engraved with his initials for Miguel, and a set of art supplies for Sophia. When Saturday finally arrived, I was more nervous than I'd been for any job interview or first date. I changed outfits 3 times before settling on a simple blue dress and cardigan, nice enough to make a good impression, but not so fancy that I'd look like I was showing off my new wealth. Elena and David's house in Parma was exactly what I'd expected from the photographs. A modest 2-story colonial with a well-maintained yard and flower boxes under the front windows. It was the kind of house that spoke of steady, middle-class comfort, built through years of hard work and careful budgeting. Elena answered the door with flour on her apron and a huge smile on her face. "Olivia, come in, come in. I hope you're hungry. I may have gone a little overboard with dinner." The house smelled like roast chicken and fresh bread, and every surface was covered with family photographs and children's artwork that had clearly been saved and treasured for years. It was exactly the kind of warm, chaotic, loving home I'd always imagined other families lived in. "David, Miguel, Sophia, come meet your Aunt Olivia." Aunt Olivia. The words made my chest tight with emotion. David emerged from the kitchen first, wiping his hands on a dish towel. He was a tall, lean man with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He had the slightly rumpled look of someone who spent his days teaching teenagers algebra and his evenings grading papers. "Olivia, we're so glad to meet you," he said, pulling me into an unexpected hug. "Elena's been talking about you all week." Before I could respond, Miguel appeared at the top of the stairs, still in his hospital scrubs. He was tall like his father, but had Elena's dark hair and expressive eyes. At 24, he had the kind of quiet confidence that came from knowing he was good at something important. "Sorry I'm late," he said, jogging down the stairs. "Emergency surgery ran long." He stopped in front of me and grinned. "So you're the mystery sister Mom found in the hospital cafeteria. Guilty as charged." "Miguel, don't tease her," Elena scolded, but she was smiling. "Where's your sister?" "Right here." Sophia burst through the front door with the kind of energy that seemed to fill the entire room. She was tiny like Elena, but had clearly inherited David's teaching gene. She was already talking before she'd even gotten her coat off. "Sorry I'm late, Mom, but Professor Williams kept us late discussing lesson plans, and then I had to stop for gas. And there was this huge line. And oh my God, you must be Olivia." Sophia practically launched herself at me in a hug that was so enthusiastic it nearly knocked me over. She was warm and bubbly and completely unself-conscious, the kind of person who made you feel like you'd been friends for years within 5 minutes of meeting her. "And I can't believe we have an aunt," she said, pulling back to look at me with bright, curious eyes. "Mom told us about Grandpa Henry's letter, and I've been dying to meet you all week. This is so crazy, like something out of a movie." "Sophia, let the woman breathe," David said with amused affection. "Come on, let's eat before Elena's pot roast gets cold." Dinner was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. The Martinez family talked over each other constantly, sharing stories and inside jokes and gentle teasing in a way that spoke of years of practice. They asked me about my life, my work, my interests, and they listened to my answers with genuine attention and interest. Miguel told stories about his residency that were both hilarious and heartbreaking. Sophia described her student teaching experience with animated gestures and funny voices. David shared his ongoing battle with a particularly challenging calculus class. Elena tied it all together with maternal pride and the kind of loving exasperation that comes from raising smart, strong-willed children. Nobody mentioned my inheritance. Nobody asked about the money or what I planned to do with it. They seemed genuinely interested in me as a person, not as someone who could potentially help them financially. It was the kind of family dinner I dreamed about my entire life. After we finished Elena's homemade apple pie, Miguel and Sophia insisted on showing me their childhood photo albums, while Elena and David cleaned up the dishes. We sat on the living room couch, flipping through pages of birthday parties and school plays and family vacations to places like Cedar Point and Put-in Bay. "Look, here's me winning the science fair in 8th grade, Miguel said, pointing to a picture of himself holding a trophy and grinning with missing front teeth. And here's me as Marion the librarian in our high school production of The Music Man, Sophia added, showing me a photo of herself in costume, clearly hamming it up for the camera. Every single photograph showed a family that genuinely enjoyed being together. Even the awkward teenage years and the college stress years were documented with love and humor and pride. Your parents did an amazing job raising you both, I said, and I meant it. They're pretty great, Miguel agreed. Mom worked extra shifts at the hospital to pay for my MCAT prep courses, and Dad tutored kids after school to help with college expenses. They never made us feel like we were a burden, even when money was tight. Which it usually was, Sophia added with a laugh. But we never really noticed because they made everything feel like an adventure. Even our camping vacations felt special because we were doing them together. I thought about my own childhood, about the expensive vacations Sophia and I had taken to places like Disney World and Myrtle Beach, and how empty they'd felt because my parents had spent the entire time making it clear that I was disappointing them somehow. You're lucky, I said quietly. We know, Sophia said, and then she surprised me by taking my hand. But you're part of our family now too, Aunt Olivia. That makes you lucky too. When Elena and David joined us in the living room with coffee and leftover pie, Elena sat down next to me on the couch. So, she said, what do you think? Are we too crazy for you? I looked around at this warm, chaotic, loving family that had welcomed me without question or reservation, and I felt my throat close up with emotion. I think, I said carefully, that I've spent my whole life wondering what it would feel like to belong somewhere. And now, I know. Elena's eyes filled with tears, and she pulled me into a hug that felt like coming home. Well then, she said, her voice thick with emotion, I guess we'd better start planning Thanksgiving dinner. We're going to need a bigger turkey. As I drove home that night, my car filled with leftover food Elena had insisted on sending with me, I realized that my father had been right about more than just the money. He'd been right about Elena and her family being the kind of family I deserved to have. For 31 years, I'd believed that I was fundamentally unlovable, that there was something broken in me that made it impossible for people to care about me. But sitting in Elena's living room, listening to Miguel and Sophia argue about whose turn it was to choose the next Netflix show, while Elena and David laughed at their antics, I finally understood the truth. There had never been anything wrong with me. I'd just been looking for love in the wrong place. My phone buzzed with a text message as I pulled into my apartment parking lot. It was from Elena. Thank you for finding us. Welcome to the family, sister. I sat in my car for a long time, reading that message over and over again, feeling the last of the loneliness that had defined my entire adult life finally begin to fade away. Tomorrow, I would start making plans for my new life. Maybe travel, maybe go back to school, maybe start the nonprofit organization I'd always dreamed about but never thought I could afford. I had choices now, real choices, and for the first time in my life, I had people who would support me no matter what I decided. But tonight, I was just going to sit in my car and savor the feeling of finally, truly, belonging somewhere. 6 months later, I was sitting in the sunroom of my new house in Shaker Heights, the same house I discovered in my father's safe deposit box, watching Elena's grandchildren play in the backyard, while she and Sophia prepared Thanksgiving dinner in the kitchen. Miguel had gotten married 3 weeks ago to his longtime girlfriend, Sarah, a pediatric nurse he'd met during his residency. Sophia had moved in with me temporarily while she finished her student teaching, claiming she needed help organizing my ridiculously huge house, but really just wanting to spend more time getting to know her new aunt. The transformation in my life had been so complete, so overwhelming, that sometimes I still felt like I was living in someone else's dream. The house in Shaker Heights was a beautiful 1920s Tudor with 4 bedrooms, hardwood floors, and a garden that Elena had already volunteered to help me redesign come spring. I'd hired a financial advisor, a recommendation from David, whose brother worked in investment management, and we'd set up a diversified portfolio that would allow me to live comfortably on the interest while preserving the principal for future generations. Future generations. The phrase still gave me chills, but in a good way now. For the first time in my life, I was thinking beyond just surviving to the next paycheck. I'd also started the nonprofit organization I'd dreamed about for years, the Carter Foundation, named after my father, at Elena's suggestion, provided college scholarships for first-generation students from working-class families. Miguel had helped me research similar organizations. Sophia had designed our website, and David had connected me with his principal to help identify potential scholarship recipients. Our first recipient was Maria Santos, a 17-year-old girl from Elena's neighborhood whose parents worked double shifts at a local factory to support their family. Maria wanted to study nursing, just like Elena had all those years ago. When we surprised her with a full 4-year scholarship to Case Western, she'd cried so hard that Elena and I had ended up crying too. It felt good to use my father's money for something that would have made him proud. "Aunt Olivia," Sophia called from the kitchen. "Can you come taste the stuffing?" Mom thinks it needs more sage, but I think it's perfect. I made my way to the kitchen, where Elena was standing over the stove with a wooden spoon in one hand and a concerned expression on her face. She'd been cooking since dawn, determined to make our first family Thanksgiving together absolutely perfect. "It tastes wonderful," I assured her after sampling the stuffing. "Better than anything I've ever made, that's for certain." "That's not saying much," Sophia teased. "You burned scrambled eggs last week." "They weren't burned. They were well done." Elena laughed and bumped my shoulder with hers. "Don't worry. We'll make a cook out of you eventually. It just takes practice." The doorbell rang, and Sophia ran to answer it. A moment later, I heard David's voice in the foyer, followed by Miguel and Sarah's laughter. They'd been at Sarah's parents' house for the morning portion of their dual family Thanksgiving celebration, and now they were here for round 2. "Something smells incredible in here," Miguel announced as he entered the kitchen, still wearing his dress shirt and tie from the earlier dinner. Sarah was right behind him, carrying a pie she'd made from scratch despite Elena's protests that we already had too much dessert. "How was the Goldberg family Thanksgiving?" Elena asked, giving them both hugs. "Wonderful," Sarah said with a smile. "Though I think I ate my weight in brisket. Mrs. Goldberg kept insisting I was too skinny and needed more food." "That's what mothers do," Elena said with a knowing look. "Wait until you have children. You'll understand then." Miguel and Sarah exchanged a look that made Elena pause in her stirring. "What?" she demanded, immediately suspicious. "Tease, what was that look?" "Well," Miguel said slowly, "we were going to wait until after dinner to tell everyone, but—" He looked at Sarah, who nodded encouragingly. "We're pregnant." The kitchen erupted in chaos. Elena dropped her wooden spoon and let out a shriek that probably scared the neighbors. Sophia started jumping up and down while clapping her hands. David appeared in the doorway to see what all the commotion was about, took one look at Miguel and Sarah's glowing faces, and immediately understood. "A grandchild," Elena said, her voice thick with emotion as she pulled them both into a fierce hug. "Oh, my babies. I'm so happy for you." I stood to the side, watching this beautiful family moment unfold, feeling the familiar tightness in my chest that came with strong emotion. In 6 months, I'd gone from having no real family to having nephews and nieces, and now, apparently, a grandnephew or grandniece on the way. "Aunt Olivia," Sophia said, grabbing my arm and pulling me into the celebration. "You're going to be a great aunt." "I don't know anything about babies," I protested, but I was smiling so hard my cheeks hurt. "None of us knew anything about babies until we had them," David said with a laugh. "You figure it out as you go. Besides," Elena added, wiping happy tears from her eyes, "this baby is going to be so spoiled by all of us. It won't matter if we don't know what we're doing." We spent the next few minutes discussing due dates, early June, and sharing pregnancy stories, and making plans for baby showers and nursery decorating. It was exactly the kind of joyful family chaos that I'd never experienced before meeting Elena, and I soaked up every second of it. Dinner was perfect. Elena had outdone herself with the turkey and all the traditional trimmings, but more than that, the conversation was warm and lively, and full of the kind of easy affection that I was still getting used to. We went around the table sharing what we were thankful for, a tradition that Elena had started when Miguel and Sophia were small. David was thankful for his family's health and happiness. Miguel was thankful for his new wife and his upcoming residency at Children's Hospital. Sophia was thankful for her student teaching placement and for getting to live in my mansion, rent-free. Sarah was thankful for being welcomed so completely into the Martinez family. Elena was thankful for answered prayers and second chances, and the sister she'd always wanted but never expected to find. When it was my turn, I looked around the table at these people who had become the center of my world in such a short time, and I felt my throat close up with emotion. "I'm thankful," I said quietly, "for learning that family isn't just about blood. It's about the people who choose to love you exactly as you are." Elena reached over and squeezed my hand. her eyes bright with unshed tears. After dinner, while the others were settling in the living room to watch football, I found myself standing at the kitchen window, looking out at the backyard where Miguel and David were throwing a football around despite their full stomachs. Sarah and Sophia were curled up on the patio furniture, talking and laughing about something on Sophia's phone. "You look thoughtful," Elena said, coming to stand beside me with 2 cups of coffee. "I was just thinking about my father," I admitted, accepting the warm mug gratefully, about how different things might have been if he'd been brave enough to bring our families together when we were young. Elena was quiet for a moment, considering this. I used to think about that too, especially after Miguel and Sophia were born. I wondered what kind of grandfather Henry would have been, whether you and Sophia would have been good aunts to my children. And now I think maybe things happened exactly the way they were supposed to," Elena said thoughtfully. "If Henry had brought us together when we were children, we would have been 2 little girls dealing with a complicated adult situation that wasn't our fault. We might have resented each other, or felt competitive, or never learned to appreciate what we found in each other as adults. You think we're better as sisters now than we would have been then? I think," Elena said with a smile, "that we're both old enough now to recognize something precious when we find it. And I think we both needed to become the women we are before we could truly appreciate having each other." I sipped my coffee and watched Miguel make an impossible catch in the backyard, followed by exaggerated celebration that made David shake his head in mock disgust. "What about Sophia?" Elena asked gently. "Have you heard from her lately?" I sighed. Sophia was the one cloud in my otherwise perfect new life. She'd made good on her threat to contest my father's will, hiring an expensive lawyer and trying to prove that I'd somehow manipulated our dying father into changing his testamentary wishes. Her efforts had been unsuccessful. My father's mental competency was well documented, and there was no evidence of coercion or undue influence. But the legal battle had been ugly and public and had effectively ended any possibility of reconciling our relationship. "Her lawyer finally convinced her to drop the lawsuit last month," I said. "There was never any real chance of overturning the will, and she was just throwing money away on legal fees." "Is she still angry?" "Furious, according to our cousin Rebecca. She's telling anyone who will listen that I'm a manipulative gold digger who stole her rightful inheritance." I paused, then added, "She's also apparently having some financial problems. The house needs a new roof, and she's been spending the $50,000 Dad left her pretty freely." Elena made a sympathetic noise. "What will you do if she asks you for help?" It was a question I'd been dreading, because I honestly didn't know the answer. Part of me, the part that remembered 31 years of being treated like I didn't matter, wanted to let Sophia figure out her own problems. But another part of me, the part that had been transformed by Elena's unconditional love and acceptance, wondered if I should try to be the bigger person. "I don't know," I admitted. "What would you do?" Elena considered this carefully. "I think I would help her if she genuinely needed it, but only if she was willing to acknowledge that what she did was wrong. Not just the lawsuit, but the way she treated you your entire life. You think she's capable of that kind of self-reflection? I think people can change if they're motivated enough, and sometimes losing everything you thought you were entitled to can be pretty motivating." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced at it and felt my stomach drop. It was from Sophia. "Olivia, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need to talk to you. It's important. Can we meet for coffee sometime this week?" I showed the message to Elena, who raised her eyebrows. "Speak of the devil," she murmured. "What are you going to do?" "I have no idea." Elena studied my face with the same careful attention she probably used when assessing her patients at the hospital. "You know what I think." "What?" "I think you should hear what she has to say. Not because you owe her anything, but because you deserve to know whether there's any possibility of salvaging a relationship with her. And if there isn't, then at least you'll know you tried everything you could. You'll be able to move forward without wondering, what if?" I looked out at my backyard again, at this family I'd found and this life I'd built, and I realized that Elena was right. I was strong enough now to face Sophia without being destroyed by whatever venom she might spill. I had people who loved me unconditionally, financial security that could never be taken away, and a sense of self-worth that no longer depended on anyone else's approval. I was finally strong enough to be generous. "Okay," I said, typing out a response. "I'll meet with her." "Sure." Tuesday afternoon at the Starbucks on Lorraine Road, 2 p.m. Elena squeezed my shoulder. "Whatever she wants, whatever she says, remember that you have a family who loves you now. She can't take that away from you." Tuesday afternoon found me sitting in Starbucks 10 minutes early. nursing a latte and trying to calm my nerves. I'd dressed carefully for this meeting, professional but not too formal, confident but not intimidating. I wanted to project the image of someone who had moved on with her life, which was true, even if I was still nervous about seeing Sophia again. She arrived exactly on time, looking thinner and more tired than I remembered. Her usually perfect hair was slightly unkempt, and there were dark circles under her eyes that her makeup couldn't quite conceal. She'd always been beautiful, but now she looked worn down in a way that made me feel unexpectedly sad for her. "Olivia," she said, sliding into the chair across from me. "Thank you for agreeing to see me." "Of course. How are you, Sophia?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I've been better. I've been a lot better, actually." I waited for her to continue, not sure what to say. "I owe you an apology," she said finally, the words coming out in a rush like she'd been practicing them. "For the things I said at Dad's funeral, for contesting the will, for a lot of things, actually. I've been horrible to you for most of our lives, and I'm sorry." I blinked in surprise. In all the scenarios I'd imagined for this conversation, a genuine apology hadn't been one of them. "What changed your mind?" I asked carefully. Sophia stared down at her hands. "Jake left me." "Oh, Sophia. I'm sorry." "Don't be. He was right to leave. I've become someone I don't like very much, and he finally got tired of it." She looked up at me with eyes that were red-rimmed with exhaustion. "He said I was bitter and jealous, and that I blamed everyone else for my problems, instead of taking responsibility for my own choices. That must have been hard to hear. It was. But it was also true." Sophia took a shaky breath. "The truth is, Olivia, I've been jealous of you my entire life." This was so unexpected that I actually laughed. "Jealous of me? Sophia, you were the golden child. You were the one Mom and Dad loved. You had everything." "I had their attention," Sophia corrected, "but I never had their respect. Not the way you did." "What do you mean?" "Dad used to talk about you when you weren't around. He'd say things like, 'Olivia's so independent,' or 'Olivia doesn't need anyone to take care of her,' or 'Olivia has real strength.' He never said things like that about me." I stared at her, completely stunned. "He never said anything like that to me." "Because he was proud of you. He respected you. With me, he just indulged me. There's a difference." Sophia wiped her eyes with a napkin, smearing her mascara slightly. "I spent my whole life trying to be perfect, trying to be what I thought they wanted, and it never felt like enough. But you just were yourself, and somehow that was better." I didn't know what to say. The foundation of everything I'd believed about our childhood was cracking apart. I made myself into someone shallow and mean because I was so afraid of not being good enough, Sophia continued. "And then when Dad died and left you everything, it felt like confirmation of every insecurity I'd ever had. It felt like he was saying that you deserved his love and I didn't." "But that's not what the will said at all," I protested. "His letter said he was proud of both of us, just in different ways." Sophia's eyes widened. "What letter?" I realized she'd never seen my father's personal letter to me, only the legal documents. Slowly, carefully, I told her about the letter, about his regrets and his pride in my independence, about how he'd called me strong and stubborn and too good for the treatment I'd received. By the time I finished, Sophia was crying openly. "He really said that," she whispered, "that he was proud of you. He said he was proud of both of us, Sophia. He just showed it in different ways." We sat in silence for a few minutes, both of us processing 31 years of misunderstood family dynamics. "I don't expect you to forgive me," Sophia said finally. "I don't even know if I can forgive myself for the way I've treated you, but I want you to know that I'm going to try to be better. I'm starting therapy, and I'm looking for a job, a real job, not just the real estate thing that was basically a hobby." "What happened to your real estate career?" Sophia's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "Turns out I wasn't as good at it as I thought. I was mostly successful because Jake's connections sent me referrals. When he left, so did my client base. I'm sorry. That must be scary." "It is. But maybe it's also what I need. Maybe I need to learn how to take care of myself instead of always depending on someone else to do it for me." I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation or calculation. But all I saw was genuine remorse and exhaustion. This was a different Sophia than the one who had hissed cruel words at our father's funeral. "What do you need from me?" I asked. "Nothing," she said quickly. "I mean, I know I don't deserve anything from you after the way I've behaved. I wanted to apologize, and I wanted to ask if maybe, someday, We could try to be sisters, real sisters. I thought about Elena, about the easy warmth and acceptance she'd shown me from our first meeting. I thought about Miguel and Sophia and David, about the way they'd welcomed me into their family without question or condition. I thought about my father's letter, about his belief that I was strong and kind, despite having every reason to be bitter. Maybe this was my chance to prove him right. I'd like that, I said quietly. But it's going to take time, Sophia. And it's going to require you to really change, not just say you want to change. I know. I'm willing to do the work if you're willing to give me the chance. Okay, I said. Let's try. Sophia's face crumpled with relief. Thank you, Olivia. Thank you for being the bigger person when I never gave you any reason to be. We talked for another hour, carefully navigating the minefield of our shared history. It wasn't easy. There were too many years of hurt and resentment to overcome in one conversation. But for the first time in our lives, we were talking to each other as equals, as adults who were trying to understand each other instead of children competing for their parents. Love. When we finally said goodbye, Sophia hugged me, awkwardly at first, then with genuine warmth. Will you tell me about your new family sometime? She asked. The sister you found? I'd like to know about the people who make you happy. I'd like that, I said, and I meant it. That evening, I told Elena about my conversation with Sophia over dinner at her house. Miguel and Sophia listened with the fascination of people who had never experienced serious family dysfunction, while David nodded with the understanding of someone who had seen plenty of family drama in his years as a high school teacher. Do you think she's really changed? Sophia asked. I think she's trying to change, I said carefully. Whether she succeeds or not remains to be seen. What matters, Elena said quietly, is that you were open to the possibility. That took courage. It took having a family that loves me no matter what, I corrected. 6 months ago, I never would have been strong enough to extend that olive branch. Elena smiled and squeezed my hand. That's what family does. We make each other braver. Later that night, as I sat in my beautiful sunroom looking out at my perfectly landscaped backyard, I reflected on the strange turns my life had taken since my father's funeral. In 6 months, I'd gone from being a lonely, invisible woman with no money and no family to someone with millions of dollars, a loving extended family, meaningful work, and even the possibility of reconciling with my estranged sister. My phone buzzed with a text from Miguel. Aunt Olivia, Sarah wants to know if you'd like to help us look at baby furniture this weekend. Fair warning, she's already gone slightly crazy with the planning. I smiled and typed back, I'd love to. I'm an expert at going crazy with planning. A few minutes later, Sophia texted, movie night tomorrow. I'm thinking romantic comedies and way too much popcorn. Then David, Olivia, I have a student who would be perfect for your scholarship program. Can we discuss it this week? And finally, Elena, sweet dreams. Sister, see you tomorrow for lunch. I sat there reading these messages, feeling overwhelmed by gratitude for these people who had chosen to make me part of their lives. They didn't need me. They'd been a complete, happy family long before I showed up, but they'd welcomed me anyway, made room for me at their table and in their hearts, given me the sense of belonging I'd been searching for my entire life. My father had been right about so many things. Money did give me choices, but the most important choice I'd made wasn't about investments or houses or career changes. The most important choice I'd made was to be brave enough to reach out to Elena, to risk rejection in pursuit of connection. Everything else, the financial security, the beautiful house, the meaningful work, was just bonus. The real inheritance my father had left me wasn't in his bank account or his safe deposit box. The real inheritance was the courage to believe that I deserved to be loved. And now, finally, I was surrounded by people who proved that belief right every single day. I turned off the lights and headed upstairs to my bedroom, already looking forward to tomorrow and all the days that would come after. For the first time in my life, the future felt like an adventure instead of something to endure. My father had been wrong about a lot of things, but he'd been absolutely right about this. I did deserve choices. I did deserve freedom. Most of all, I deserved to have the kind of family that would love me exactly as I was. And now, impossibly, miraculously, I had all of that and more. As I drifted off to sleep in my comfortable bed in my beautiful house, surrounded by the knowledge that I was loved and valued and wanted, I whispered a quiet thank you to the Father who had finally, in the end, found a way to give me everything I'd ever needed. Tomorrow would bring new adventures, new challenges, new reasons to be grateful. But tonight, I was just going to sleep peacefully, wrapped in the warm certainty that I finally, truly belonged somewhere. And that was the greatest inheritance of all.